When you live up in the border parts of the North Country, along the St. Lawrence River, up in Akwesasne, northern Franklin and Clinton County, a strong social and economic relationship with Canada is like a way of life. Here's Massena Mayor Greg Paquin.
Grown up right across the river from them. I've gone over there. I've golfed. My sons and daughters have played hockey. We travel there constantly.
That's why the will he, won't he of President Donald Trump's tariff threats against Canada has been such a whirlwind here. We go to Massena and Cornwall, Ontario, on today's Story of the Day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Clarkson University, offering over 95 programs of study with campuses in the Hudson Valley, Central, and Northern New York. More at clarkson.edu.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Friday, February 7th. First up, Border Patrol agents were at a school in Carthage earlier this week. As Kara Chapman reports, it wasn't an immigration raid, but the visit did cause a stir in the community.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection says that on Tuesday, agents were looking for more than 10 undocumented immigrants with criminal records in Jefferson County. At about 9 a.m., they pulled over a 30-year-old Guatemalan man in Carthage. He wasn't one of the people they were looking for, but CBP says he was also in the country illegally and had missed a required immigration hearing. The man told the agents his 2 children were at a local school. CBP says he asked to be brought there so he could sign them out. He told them he didn't want to be separated from them and doesn't have any other family in the U.S. Carthage Central School Superintendent Jennifer Primo says CBP let their offices know they were heading to an elementary school ahead of time. She says the agents never had access to the school and remained outside in their vehicle.
Overall, the experience was very transparent and extremely respectful. There was nothing that would be categorized as a raid of any sort, and our building principal was able to release the children into the care of a custodial parent.
In an email sent to staff, which was forwarded to NCPR, Primo said agents, quote, assured us that there is no intention to remove children from school or involve schools in immigration matters. CBP says the Guatemalan man and his children were processed and taken back to their home in Jefferson County. WWNY-TV reports he got a new court date and was allowed to go home because he has the proper paperwork to be employed and is paying taxes. Primo says there was a mixed reaction to the agent's presence, but she thinks many people weren't aware of what was happening at the time.
It was not something that in any way disrupted the school day for students and or staff.
Primo says, with President Donald Trump's crackdown on undocumented immigrants, people have heightened concerns right now.
With that brings a certain level of anxiety, so we do try to offer support for our staff in any way if they are feeling that anxiety, just, given the circumstances.
Shortly after taking office, Trump rescinded a policy that prevented migrant arrests at sensitive places like schools, hospitals, and churches. Primo says Carthage Central School District doesn't collect immigration status from students, so it's not known how many are undocumented.
We would not be turning children over without seeing a proper warrant or subpoena. We've identified our school attorney as the person who would verify anything of that nature.
Primo says it's important to have awareness and cooperate in order to help maintain calm in the community.
Our jobs are to keep people, keep our students safe and in school. And so, we would proceed always with our normal practices.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, didn't respond to an email from NCPR about whether any raids have taken place at schools in upstate New York. CBP says efforts to locate the original undocumented immigrants agents were looking for are ongoing. Kara Chapman, North Country Public Radio.
Here in the North Country, President Trump's tariffs against Canada could have big impacts on people's pocketbooks and lives. Reporter Amy Feireisel visited Massena, New York, and Cornwall, Ontario, and talked to residents about how they're thinking of a potential trade war.
At the bustling Dollar Tree in Massena, I overhear a conversation between the bearded cashier and 2 silver-haired women. They're talking tariffs.
I believe it's a lose-lose situation for both the Canadian and the American people.
Frances Renault is here shopping for the day with a friend. They're both Canadian and live in Cornwall, just a 15-minute drive and a border crossing away. Massena and Cornwall have been neighbors for centuries. She says tariffs go against the way of life here.
The friendliness, the getting together, the helping, assisting with each other is twofold.
The American cashier, Howard Jesmer, says he thinks the tariffs are just a negotiating tool.
I'm thinking it's more of a ploy this way to help them step up
He says there are problems at the northern border, and this is Trump's way of getting Canada to do more.
Helping with guarding the border so it's just not all on the U.S. side to try and cover it.
It's a very polite exchange, but there's some tension underneath it. That's something I feel all day. Most people really don't want to talk to me, or about tariffs or Trump. As a former factory town with a big labor and union presence, Massena was historically a Democratic stronghold. But that's been shifting. As companies like General Motors and Alcoa left or downsized, so did jobs and people. In the last election, 54% of voters chose Donald Trump. Lifelong resident Steve Netto says he doesn't like tariffs, period, because it's just another tax that nobody can afford.
In my opinion, it's not a political thing. The people who have the tariffs imposed on them are just going to pass the costs on to the consumer, and everything's expensive enough already, and we do a lot of business with Canada.
Netto is one of the owners of Trombino's, a well-known Italian restaurant in Massena. He estimates about 10% of his customers are Canadian. Before the pandemic, and when the Canadian dollar was stronger, he said it was more like 30%. He says for him, the northern border doesn't feel like this huge problem.
I know the border's always been, there's been issues with drugs and stuff on the border around here, but it's been fairly quiet recently.
You're not feeling like the northern border is under attack?
No, never felt that way.
But there's a lot of uncertainty about what happens next, a question mark as the tariffs are on a 30-day pause.
I'm already getting questions from customers about this.
Anthony Viskovich runs a car dealership in Massena that his grandfather started. A lot of his cars and parts come from abroad.
And I'm telling people the same answer. It's like, I don't have the answers.
A trade war is scary. Some people totally blame Donald Trump, like Gloria Martin, who I meet when I stop at a Stewart's for gas. She says he's creating an unnecessary problem, potentially ruining two economies.
Inflation will rise sky high, and Trump doesn't care about that. All he cares about making money for himself.
A lot of people I talk to are just plain tired. Some are really frustrated with politics and government in general. They use words like circus, show, theater. That sentiment continued after I drove over the bridge to Canada and into Cornwall. It's also a former big industry town, think paper mills and garment factories, but a lot bigger than Massena, about 50,000 people, and it's transitioned to other kinds of manufacturing and warehouse distribution. In the food court of Cornwall's indoor mall, I meet Sally Strata. She lives just outside Cornwall in Ingleside. She says politicians and the media are riling people up, including her own mother.
My mother's a senior, so she's terrified, like terrified. And I'm like, Mom, stop watching the news. Stop watching the news. You're going to have a heart attack.
She thinks it's all posturing, that Trump's playing the big, tough negotiator, and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is playing Canada's savior.
Go on record as saying, oh, well, we're going to fight against the big bad U.S. and the big bad Trump.
She says she doesn't think Trump's ask for more border security is crazy, and that she wishes her own government was tougher on crime. I heard that frustration with the Canadian status quo echoed by another shopper, Bill Holmes. He says Trump is shaking things up, and Canadian officials don't know how to respond.
Now Donald Trump, he's more of a disruptor. He's a different type of politician. That's something we've never seen before.
Neither Holmes nor Strata thinks there's much danger in tariffs actually happening. They say the impact would be too devastating on both economies. But other people are taking it more seriously. Troy Viancourt owns a real estate brokerage in Cornwall. He says local businesses are watching carefully and would see real impacts. And he says Canadians are thinking about how they spend their money.
Yeah, I think I don't think it's a good thing for relations. I think there's a growing amount of Canadians who are saying that they want to buy from Canadian producers and retailers.
He's rethought his own travel plans. His family spends a lot of time in the Adirondacks, goes to Myrtle Beach every winter.
We're supposed to go to Florida in April, for instance, and we're questioning whether we should be doing that.
He says that feels strange because Canada has always been a friend to the U.S. and vice versa. He wants relations to stay good, the way they've always been. That's something everyone seems to agree on, including the mayors of Cornwall and Massena. They met earlier this week to brainstorm how their two communities would weather potential tariffs together. But for now, everyone is stuck in this strange sort of limbo. Amy Feireisel, North Country Public Radio, on the New York side of the U.S.-Canadian border.
We have more news through the weekend on our website, ncpr.org. Music today by Mark Corey and Ben Sharon, both of Watertown. Have a great weekend. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.